Hey everyone, welcome to Pittsburgh.NET User Group Meetup. Sorry, we had some hiccups with the presentation here. Yeah, thanks everyone for being patient here. You should be able to see the screen now. So we are part of the .NET Foundation. So we are .NET Pittsburgh User Group. You can follow us on the social links here. Today we are going to look into automating user interface tests with Playwright with our seasoned presenter, none other than David Girard. I'll get you introduced. Dave, welcome to the group. Thank you for taking your opportunity in presenting us with the Playwright.
Am I on? Is it my turn?
Yes, your turn.
Okay. All right. Hello.
He said hello and left.
Press the wrong button.
Come on, man. You said hello and
left. Can you see my screen right now?
No, you are not chatting yet.
I am not sharing my screen. Okay, hang on a second. Let's see. Share screen. Don't show tips again. Bear with me. I'm not, I haven't used StreamYard for a while. Let's use that one. Share that screen right there.
Yep, we got it.
All right. Welcome to my presentation. Thanks for your patience. We're going to talk about user interface tests and an open source tool called Playwright that allows you to automate unit tests. My name is David. I work for Microsoft. My job is to help our partners to design and build applications on Azure, our cloud platform. If you want to follow me online, I have an active blog at davidgr.com. I also have a couple of TV shows. I'd like you to check them out. Maybe smash that subscribe button. The URLs are on screen right now. If you see any URLs in this slide deck, by the way, you don't have to write them down really fast. At the end of the deck, I'll have a link to the deck itself, which of course will have all of the links in it. So user interface tests, why do we do it? Why bother? Well, there's a lot of reasons why we test the user interface. First and foremost is we want to test that the application does what it's supposed to do. We want to validate the functionality of that application so we can have a better user experience and catch any bugs or inconsistencies or inefficiencies and things like that. We want to ensure consistency. So by frequently testing the user interface, we can get a lot more consistency in our applications. So we want to see if something is physically wrong with the application. Maybe it's a spelling error. Maybe it's you click a button and it actually throws an exception. Maybe it just doesn't do what the specs say it's supposed to do. You say it tells it to save something and it doesn't save it properly. Or you tell it to navigate to page A and it accidentally navigates to page B. Things like that. We also want to catch, if we're building a browser application, we want to catch things that work, ensure that things work properly in different browsers. We as developers sometimes fall in love with one browser, and if we really, really love Chrome, that's fine, but not all of our users are using Chrome. They might be using Firefox, or they might be using Eclipse or Edge or something, or Opera. So we want to be able to test all of those. We want to test for accessibility, make sure that there are the people that have some sort of physical handicap, either permanently or temporarily, that they can use it. And then we want to make it part of our regression testing. So every time we make a change, it could affect the user interface, the way we access. So for example, if somebody changed the name of a field in the user interface, then the data that's bound to that field might change. Or if somebody changed the data name on the back end, and we're expecting the user interface expecting that binding, well, that might break something. So even though we didn't change the UI itself, it might break the UI. It's sort of the butterfly effect. You make a change over here in this part of the system, and it inadvertently has the side effect of breaking something in that part of the system. So these are all really important. I think if you're a believer that applications should be tested and you believe quality is important, you probably sold on these things already. The problem is that it tends to be testing user interfaces tends to be slow, and the reason it tends to be slow is traditionally we've been doing them manually. The traditional way of doing user interface testing is to write a script, and the script is something like, given this, when this happens, then this should occur. So given that the user is on the shopping cart page, when they click the buy now button, then it should add the shopping cart items to their order and process the order and display a page that says order complete with a list of what they are and maybe a link for tracking and sending an email out, whatever. So what in a lot of the organizations I've been over the last many decades of writing software, we would actually go into Microsoft Word and we would write something like this out. So all these test cases that said, given going to this page, when the user does this, then they should expect to see this, to experience this. And then a human being would sit down at their keyboard, launch the application, go to that page, and do that action and verify manually by looking at the screen whether or not the expected action occurs. And if it didn't, they'd mark it as not passed. And if it did, then they would move on to the next test. Well, that's time consuming, and that's also potentially unreliable because you're asking someone to do the same thing manually over and over again. There's potential that they might do it wrong the second time. All right, so enter automated UI testing. For a long time, most of us are sold on the idea of automated testing. We want to test our APIs, we want to test our database calls, we want to test all the code we've written that's not part of the UI using testing frameworks like XUnit or NUnit, things like that. Those are really popular, and we can build those into our CI/CD pipeline so that every time we make a change, we can do regression testing and check to make sure that the change that it does what it's supposed to do and that it didn't break anything else in here. Well, the same thing is true of the UI. If we automate this, then we can run these tests faster because we're not relying on a human being grabbing a Word document, reading it, and then typing it out. But we also can do it more efficiently and more consistently because the computer does the same thing over and over again. We're scripting these tests. So we're not worried about a person accidentally typing in the wrong thing. Computers tend to be more consistent than people. So we can save costs, we can save time, and we could even push them into our CI/CD pipeline. So whether you're using GitHub Actions or you're using Azure DevOps or whatever your CI/CD technology is, if you have an automated testing process, then you can put that into the pipeline so that every time some action occurs, so for example, whenever you do a pull request or maybe nightly or whatever, you could automatically do these things, which again adds to the consistency and the quality of your software. And we can also support automated logging so we can look back and see what worked and what didn't work. So these are advantages to testing in general, but of course they're advantages to UI testing as well. The tool that I want to talk about is called Playwright. Playwright is an open source tool that is available for free. It's a node.js library, and it's designed to automate UI tests. Let me show you this. There's a link right here, playwright.dev, so you can learn all kinds of stuff about this. Here at this link here, there's documentation, all kinds of things right here, and that's all very cool. Come back to that a little bit. So if you want to dive into more than I'm going to talk about over the next 60 or 80 minutes or whatever, then you can go and look at that. And by the way, I said 60 or 80 minutes. I actually don't know how long this presentation is. This is the world premiere of my presentation. You all are the first ones to hear it. So that's where I am. That's why if I sound excited, that's why. All right. So what is Playwright? Playwright is a cross-browser, cross-platform, cross-language tool for doing user interface testings. When I say cross-browser, cross-platform, cross-language, it doesn't care about whether you're running on Windows or Linux. It has the ability to test things in Chrome or Edge or Firefox or Opera or Safari, lots of different browsers because it has engines for those browsers. It doesn't care what language you've written in. It's not testing the language itself. It's not testing the code. It's testing the user interface that was generated by that code. And it has support for, I mentioned, Edge and Safari browser and Opera and so on. But it also has support for mobile browsers as well, the mobile versions of those browsers, as well as the desktop versions. You get to choose which browsers you're going to test in your configuration. Some of the advantages of it is it supports something called auto wait. And what that means is that if you have scripting to say, do step 1, do step 2, maybe click on and navigate to this page and then enter some text into this text box and then click this button. Auto wait says, don't go to the next step until you've completed the step before. Sometimes when you write scripts, the scripts can kind of get ahead of themselves, especially in UI. It may still be typing in the text box while it's clicked on the button. The auto wait stops that from happening. It tells you that it tells the engine, don't click the button until the text box is completely full. This is going to be a problem in manual tests as well. I've done that before where the login page shows up and I start typing my password and press enter, but it hasn't filled in my password yet before the submit button. Or maybe it auto-fills in my password. It's probably more likely. A lot of pages, they'll auto-fill in a form for me, and I'm so used to it that I immediately click the submit button, but it hasn't completely finished auto-filling the form. I get a validation error. Oh, you didn't fill this field out yet. Well, I filled it out. I'm just a little too anxious. A couple other things here. It does capture results of your tests. So if you run tests, it'll say pass, fail. It'll capture screenshots and videos, which is really nice for troubleshooting when a problem does occur. And just some trace results of what happened every step along the way. It, by default, will use context isolation. So if you're running multiple tests simultaneously, each one will run in its own environment. So you're not sharing session state between these things or cookies between them all. It supports single login, so you can log in one time and then use that across multiple tests, which saves a lot of time and a lot of complexity. All right, what do we do? We've got a bunch of tools in here. There's a tool for, it's a node library, so there's a tool for generating some scaffolding. There's a tool for automatically recording tests, and I'll show you a cool demo of that, where I can just bring this up and just start clicking around and it will generate the code associated with clicking and typing and navigating to a URL and testing things and assertions. It has a trace viewer so you can step through it. There's reporting so you can see if tests fails. It'll give you information about tests succeeding, but it's most useful when a test fails. You want to say, why did it fail? Well, it failed because expected this in this field and that wasn't there. There's also a Visual Studio Code plugin that will help because Visual Studio Code is my tool of choice. I think there are plugins for other integrated development environments, but I haven't used them before, so I can't really speak to those. All right, to install it, npm init. It's a node module, as I said. npm init playwright at latest. We'll install it right here. And when you run this command, it actually will ask you questions about, do you want to run it in TypeScript or in JavaScript? Where do you want to put your tests? Which folder? Do you want to include GitHub actions? Which browsers do you want to support? So a little wizard pops up and asks you, what do you want to include? What are the defaults for this scaffolded application? You can go back and change those later. A lot of this stuff is done through configuration files, which I'll show you in a bit. Here's an example of the files that are created. So playwright config test is the configuration of your tests themselves, package.json or package-lock.json. These are files that have configuration in them. Example spec.test. This actually has some tests. So you can get an idea of the syntax, what a test looks like. And then there might be some samples in here with more. So, actually, this is an old file. I don't think it has this anymore. More richer text examples. I'll have to update this slide. But here's the sample one that it creates. Test has title. So we're checking to see that if I navigate to this URL, then we're going to check that there is a title for that URL. And we want to say, okay, expect, I'm sorry, this is actually the navigation. Page.goto is, this is the name of the test. This is a TypeScript method right here. This is the name of the test, has title. It navigates to this page right here, and then here's an assertion. Expect that page to have title named Playwright. So if I navigate to this page and that page has a title called exactly Playwright, then it passes. If the title is something different, it will fail. Here's a different test. To get started, navigate to the same page, and then on that page, click a button with the name Get Started, or rather a link with the name Get Started. And after you click that, then look at the heading called Installation and verify that that heading is visible. So it's a very rich object model. It's a small subset of it. And if you go to the playwright.dev site and look at the documentation, you can find more information on there. If you install the Visual Studio plugin, you'll see some IntelliSense that will help you out as well. And here's the Visual Studio Code extension. This one is published by Microsoft. You just go into VS Code and search for Playwright. It'll be the first one that pops up there. And that can do things like record and run tests within the IDE, actually debug and step through the tests. It has some AI to allow you to fix some of the tests if you want to. So it just makes things a little bit easier. It isn't required, but it's helpful if you're working on it. This extension is one of the beauties of VS Code is that you only install the extensions that you are going to use, which makes the tool itself be very lightweight. It's not bogged down and bloated with all this stuff that you may never, ever use. Now, when I create a Playwright test, I have two options. I can write the code myself. I showed you an example of the object model before, that sample code, but I can also record my actions. There is a recording tool, and it brings up a user interface, a browser, and on it, as you perform actions on there, it'll actually generate the code for you that then you can copy and paste into the code in your project, which is really nice. And then once you want to, and this is the syntax we're doing, npx playwright code gen. That launches the recording tool. And if I say npx playwright code gen and pass it a URL, then it'll actually open up a browser with the appropriate URL. If I don't say that, then I'm still free to manually open up that browser. But this just kind of saves time if I'm working on the same page over and over again. And then to run the test, npx playwright test. npx is just npm, npm executable, executed node command, and playwright is the executable to run, and there's an argument called test. It says, I want to run all of the tests in the current project. And if I specify a specific name of the test, I can do so. So if I only want to run certain tests in a given file, all the tests in one file, then I could do that. If I want to set some configuration, then I could point it to a config file here using the --config optional parameter. And I can even set the number of workers to run. So if I have like many tests, let's say hundreds of tests, and I want it to run more efficiently, it might make sense to set this --workers optional parameter and say, I want to spin up more than one worker to try to run these tests in parallel. So they'll finish a lot faster. This is the maximum number of workers. You might not need, if I set the workers to 20 and only have 3 tests, it probably won't spin up 20 different workers. There just isn't enough work for us to do. It's smart enough to say, I'll just spin up as many tests as I need up to this number right here. When the results come out, there is a report that comes out that tells you which tests pass, which test fails. This green check mark, as you probably can guess, means it passed. The X means that it failed. And if I clicked on that, then it would show me more details about the test. The other thing I want to point out, so that's Playwright in a nutshell. What Microsoft has added to this is there is a tool inside of Azure, a service inside of Azure called Playwright Workspaces. And this is a service that's designed to host Playwright tests. So you can run those same UI tests in the cloud, which is really useful. One, if you've got a lot of tests, you want the scalability of the cloud. And it provides isolation for each test. It'll run in its own workspace, so that it's not sharing resources that might either spoil the test or maybe conflict and create deadlocks. But also allows you to add it to your continuous integration pipeline, because when you put an action in a pipeline to run your tests, you probably don't want those tests to run on your local machine because the pipeline's running in the cloud. It doesn't know about your local machine. You want it to run somewhere in the cloud, and Azure is a really good place for doing that. And workspaces are, let's see, this is again, I'll show you a demo at the end of these slides, but if you've used Azure before, you know that to get started in the user interface, you go to portal.azure.com, and then there's a big button on the top left that says create a resource. I click that button, and then I can search for the service I want to create. If I search for Playwright workspaces, this thing comes out, and I can click on create down at the bottom of that, and it brings up this dialog right here where you can put in a resource group and put in the name of the workspace you want to create, the region that it's in, whether or not to enable reporting. And if you do enable reporting, it'll ask you where do you want to store those reports, and you give it the storage account to store them in, and then you just click review and create, and it'll generate this workspace, a place for your tests to run. And it just takes a few seconds to run. And now you've got all these options, all these on the side here to look at your test runs, to set up security on there, to view the activity logs. There's even a link here to get started that walks you through step-by-step how to run your tests inside of this Azure workspace. To run a workspace, remember there was the first thing I showed you was npm init Playwright at latest. If you want to run them in the cloud, it's a slight variation on that. We say npm init at Azure/Playwright at latest. That will create a project that will run in the cloud. The configuration files will be a little different, and it'll just tell it that when you run tests, those should run in Azure. When you're running in the cloud, if you're checking tests in, you probably want to not hard code some of the information that you're using. You probably want to save those environment variables, and there's npm tools for doing that, saving them in a .env file. There's a configuration file that contains a lot of this information, including, where to find the environment variables. Here's an environment variable, for example, where to run. It has to know where to run in which Playwright workspace. So each Playwright workspace has a URL assigned to it, and you can set that environment variable up to point to that, so you don't have to hard code things like that, which was really nice, because then you can decide whether or not, sometimes run it in your dev environment, sometimes in your test environment, maybe in production even if you want to. We have different environments. Of course, to do all this, you do have to log in. And then when to run the tests, then we have this config file which tells it where environment variables. We have to add that config equals playwright.service.config. We have to add this argument to our Playwright test to run. Running the tests. I already showed you this one. I don't know why I have this slide in here twice, but npx Playwright test with all these possible arguments. Good time for a quick review. All right, so that's Playwright Workspaces, Azure's service that allows you to run your Playwright user interfaces in the cloud. Now, once you're running them in the cloud, you have the option then to build them into your CI/CD pipelines. And for those that don't know, CI/CD stands for Continuous Integration, Continuous Deployment. And it's a way for taking all of your code, compiling it, running tests, just everything you want to do to just make sure that it's ready, and then pushing it out to some environment so that it will run. So you can push it out to a dev environment, a test environment, or to production. And with this continuous integration means that we can have triggers to say these processes that will compile, test, and deploy your application, they will run automatically in response to some action. And an action might be somebody pushed some code into the code repository, or somebody merged a pull request with the main branch, something like that. And this is really nice. It's a nice part of agile development methodologies because you're testing really, really fast. Every time I push code, I want to make sure that I didn't break anything. Every time I do a merge request, I make sure it doesn't conflict with the code that was already in the main branch. So I know right away, oh, this code that I merged, it either caused a problem or it conflicted with somebody else's code, and that conflict caused a problem. I can right away stop, back up, and say, well, I know something changed, and something just recently changed. It's a lot easier to fix stuff if you know that it just recently changed than if you find out, oh, something in the last week or so or the last month or so changed. So if I want to integrate it into CI/CD, then these are the steps that you need to do. You need to have a local Git repository and a GitHub repository. I shouldn't say GitHub. You need to have some code repository in the cloud. The demo I'm going to show uses GitHub Actions. You'll need a YAML file, and YAML stands for yet another markup language. And this is just a configuration file that says what are the steps in your continuous integration and your continuous deployment. Some of those steps might involve secrets that you don't want to put in your repository, either because they're secret, because there may be something like a password or an ID, or maybe because there are things that might change. So a variable like the URL that you're testing on, the URL that you're connecting to, those things you might want to have the flexibility without having to change source code. You might want to just have a value that changes and say, okay, now I'm deploying to this environment, but tomorrow I might be deploying to that environment. So you can just change a configuration without having to change the source code. And then there is some security involved in this as well. You'll need to go into register an application, add that registration ID to a contributor role, things like that. These are the steps for doing it. I was going through the demo of doing this. It actually takes quite a while. So I've got one set up, and you can look at these steps here. I'll just tell them to you. Create a GitHub repository, connect it to a local Git repo. You need to register your application, which would create a principal user in Azure. You need to assign that principal user to the contributor role, and that's important. And then you need to give that user permission to push code into the main branch or whatever branch you're specifying to do the actions in GitHub that it needs to do. And then you probably want to have secrets in there so you don't hard code things in your code. These are all the ones that you really need. The URL of where your Playwright workspace is, the client and tenant ID, and the subscription ID. This essentially tells it where in Azure to run your tests. And then you'll have a YAML workflow, which is all the steps that are involved in actually doing. If you've done any CI/CD, you're probably familiar with YAML, and that tells it, what triggers it, where does it run, what are the steps involved, etc. All right, this is my last slide. Really, is just a word of caution. User interface tests, they're slow, and they're probably more fragile. They're almost always more fragile than your back-end tests because user interface tends to change a lot. Users, they say, I want to tweak this, I want to change this, I want to get rid of this button, add this field, add this text, and so on. And so they tend to be very fragile. And you need to balance your passion for Agile, the idea that I want to test frequently and get feedback really quickly, with the fact that these things are going to take a lot of time to run. They just take longer to run than just calling an API that does a quick calculation. And so I'm not saying don't, but you might not want to be running your UI tests every single check-in if those UI tests are going to take minutes to run, because that might slow down your development process to an unacceptable rate. Maybe you want to run them only when you do a pull request, or maybe you want to run them only when you do maybe nightly or something like that. How you do it is up to you, but you really need to think about that balance. Is when you want to do it. You don't want to wait too long because now, oh gosh, a user interface test broke. And it's the first time I've run it in a month. Something that happened in the last month broke it. Now I've got a lot of detective work to do. Whereas if you run it every time you check in code, well, now you know that like the code I just checked in broke it. Probably somewhere in between there. Just something to think about. All right, time for a demo. Let's do that right now. I am going to launch Visual Studio Code right here. And I will open a folder. Actually, I'll create this folder here. I'll call it Playwright Pit. And just real quickly, I'll check and see if anybody's got any questions in the chat window. If I can find it. Where is that? Private chat, comments. All right. Don't see any questions in here, so I will continue right here. And so back to here. So I just created. I create that folder? Playwright test, yeah. So select that folder. So now I've got an empty folder here on my local hard drive, and I am going to open up a terminal window. Type a command in here. Was the command that I showed you on my slide. I want to say npm init playwright at latest. Looks like I got to spell it there. Playwright latest. And it's going to ask me a series of questions here. Do I want to use TypeScript or JavaScript? I'll just take the default. Just press enter to accept TypeScript as a default. Where do you put your end-to-end tests? What folder do I want these tests to be in? It's suggesting the tests folder. That's fine. So I'll just press enter, but I could override that. Add a GitHub Actions workflow, yes or no? Yes is the default. So I'll press enter to accept that. Install Playwright browsers. And it's reminding me that I can do that later on if I want to. I'll say yes. And now it's going to initialize the project here. And you can see down here, it's doing something, installing, downloading browsers. And there it is. It was 10 seconds. It created this entire project right here. And I'll go through some of these files here. You can look in the playwright.config.ts. If I had said JavaScript, it would have been JS file. But here's a TypeScript file which gives it some configuration information. Test directory is going to be the tests right up here. That's where the tests are, and you can see that there's a test in there already. Run everything in parallel, and just certain things in here. The report should be generated in HTML format. Here's the browsers. This is important here. The browsers that are installing Chromium, Firefox, and WebKit. And if you're not familiar with that, Chromium is the browser engine on which Chrome and Edge are based. Firefox, of course, is the browser engine on which Firefox is based, and WebKit is the browser engine on which Safari is based. And you could add more to that. In fact, down here are some mobile browsers. It's all commented out. So if you wanted to test on mobile Chrome, you could uncomment this, or mobile Safari, and so on. There's all sorts of things like that. So I'm just going to leave the defaults in here like this. Let's go through this file here. Playwright test. These are just package.json. These are just the dependencies to install. Package lock.json. These are more details about these dependencies on here. And there's a bunch of them. You really don't have to worry about that too much. It's done. Node did that automatically with that npm init command. What's interesting is this one right here underneath tests. It generated a sample test. And I already went through this on the slide here. There's two tests in here. One is called has title, and one is called get started link. And they both start out by navigating to playwright.dev. Same thing here. They both navigate to playwright.dev. This await here says await. Don't try to do the next thing until the page is loaded here. So, and then expect, this is an assertion. Expect that the page will have a title of Playwright. Expect that if I go to a link with the name Get Started and click on that link, that there will be a heading named installation, and that will be visible. So this is the given, when, then idea on here. Let's just go ahead and run those tests. And the command to run them locally, is npx playwright I should bump up my font here. Let's see if I can do that. Test. Let me see. View. Testing search. How do I zoom in on this? Appearance. Zoom in. There we go. There we go. Okay. So npx playwright test right here. And look at that. It says it's running 6 tests. Isn't that interesting? Because I told it there are only 2 tests. There's a has title and there's a get started. Those are the 2 tests. And yet it's running 6 tests. And the reason it's running 6 tests is because when I configured it for 3 different browsers. And it's running each one for those 2 tests for each one of those browsers. That's why there are 6 tests. All 6 of them passed. It only took 10 seconds to run that. And if I want to see the results of that, it's actually telling me that right here. npx playwright show report is the command. So I'll do the npx playwright show -report right here. And that'll launch a local web server. And you can see there they are. These are the 6 tests, 2 in Chromium, 2 in Firefox, 2 in WebKit. If I click on any one of these here, it shows me all of the steps in that, and I can drill down and see even more information about exactly what happened. It's more useful when something fails. So let me close that and do this. Kill that local web server so I can start over again. And this is the Playwright test, getting started with Playwright. I'll pause here. Are there any questions? Let's head back over there. I do not see any questions here. All right, so I will proceed. All right, the next thing I want to show you is how to generate your own tests. And there are 2 ways to do that. Here's a test right here. You can use this object model. There's some IntelliSense, await, expect. It does help you with the IntelliSense here. So you can type that out yourself. And I definitely would encourage you to become familiar with this syntax. Look at the documentation, but there is a simple way to get started. This will help you to learn that as well, and that's by recording tests on your own. And there's a command for doing that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to test a page that I have, and let me see if I can find in my notes the URL of that page. It's this is it right here. All right, so I have a page that I've created here. It is a web page. It's just some text up here, a couple of text boxes, some radio buttons right here, and a submit button right there. And what does it say? What is your name? What is your quest? What is your favorite color? So these are important questions that we all need to ask ourselves. And I want to test this application. So let me go back into Visual Studio Code. And to get started, I want to use the recording tool to do that. The way that I do that is with the code gen command. So go down to the terminal here, npx playwright code gen, and then the URL. Let's see if I hit enter there. Oh yeah, the completion help out here. Into that. And what that does is it launches, first of all, I told it which browser, which URL. So it launched a browser. I'll drag that over onto this screen right here. And there's that same web page in a browser, and then also it put up this window right here, which has some code. So I'll put these side by side so you can see them. Not sure if I can zoom in on that. I'll zoom on that a little bit. There we go. And over here, you notice as soon as I clicked, it generated some code. I just clicked on that. So the first thing it did, page.goto, it navigated to this URL right here. And then page.locator, because I clicked on that, I really didn't want to click on that. So I could just come in here. And I guess I got to delete that from here. But I'll go in here, I'll click on what is your name. Click, and you see that there's the code to click on a text box named what is your name required .click. I'll do that. And of course, my name, I'm going to put my name in here. It is Arthur, King of the Britons. All right. And then I'll click on what is your quest. Click on that. And I'll type in what is your quest. And I think you know the answer to this. It is I seek the Grail. Exclamation point. All right. And you can see right here that click on it, fill it in with I seek the Grail. Click on it, fill it in with Arthur, King of the Britons. And I'll come down here. What is your favorite color? And I'll select blue. No, green. And it generated code to click on blue and then green radio button. And then I'll click the submit button right here. And it navigated to this page right here. And that's not enough. I want to have, so given that I was on that page, when I fill in these text boxes and click submit, then I expect something. So I want an assertion here. And then right up here, if I hover over this toolbar, there's a button, assert visibility or assert text or assert value, things like that. So maybe I want to say assert that this button is visible right there. Expect button named save my response to be visible. Click on this assert text right there. And I could change that if I want to, but I'll say check right here. Now expect this get by rule log to contain text, your response was submitted. So this is all code that was generated automatically from this. I'll just hit over here and stop recording this. And now what I'm going to do is I'll just Control A and copy all that code, come back into my project and create a new test right here. New file. I'll call it pittests.ts. This is JavaScript, so I probably want to use camel case. There's the convention. And I'll just paste that code into here and rename it pit tests right there. Save that. All right, so now I've got one more test in here, and I can modify that if I want to. I think I didn't, for example, care about this right here. I can add other assertions and so on right here. This is work. This is a valid test. And let's go ahead and run this. So come back down here. I'm going to press Control C to, let's see, start over again. And then I'll just hit up arrow here. And again, NPX Playwright test. So now I have 4 tests. I'm sorry, 3 tests. I have 2 from the example. And oops, you know what? It only found 3 of them. And the reason is because I didn't name this properly. Let me rename this to pittests.spec.ts. That will work. All right, let's close that right here. Close that. Let's do that. That should work. So now 9 tests. And that's because there are 3 of them, 3 tests, but there are 3 different browsers. It's going to test it in, and it's going to test it in WebKit, and then in Chromium, and then in Firefox, each one of those engines. And it seems to be taking a little bit longer this time, and I know why that is. It's because one of the tests is failing. So I can let it go. Let's wait till it's finished. All right, so it's, oops, didn't mean to go back there. Go, come on. My mouse is going a little crazy today. Sorry about that. And I didn't mean to do that. What I wanted to do, so it did fail. And if I want to see the results of it, I can do this show npx playwright show report again here, and that'll launch a local web server and show this page right here. And you can see that this one right here failed. The get started link failed. And it failed, but it failed only for Firefox. Pit test also failed. And it failed for it. If I drill down into it, I can see exactly what happened. So it wasn't able to click this checkbox. So there's something funky about WebKit. WebKit is the Safari, the engine for Safari web browser. Looks like this is for Firefox. So I might want to drill down into it. So I'm not going to dig into this exactly why it failed. I just want to show you that there's some information in here that tells it failed and exactly which line it failed on. And you can dig into that and say, yeah, I've got a problem. This one has a problem with Firefox. That one has a problem with Safari. It might be because I'm running it on Windows and Safari is really a Mac browser. Could be something like that. It's hard to say, but we could drill down into that and figure out why. What's the problem? Why does it work just fine on these other browsers, but not on this? That in itself is useful information. It's a good starting point for us to figure out what the problem is. All right. I think I'll pause again, see if there are any questions yet. Come back to you. I think if there are, they'll be in this comments section, right? Maybe join the chat. Let me see.
Yeah, that's right, David. We don't have any at the moment.
Okay. All right, just checking. All right. Let's go back to here. All right. So the last thing I wanted to show you was the continuous integration, continuous deployment. And I showed you the steps here, but I'm going to give you a link. I have a YouTube channel. I actually have a couple of YouTube channels, but one of them is called Gcast. And if you go to, I'll show that again one time. If I go to aka.ms/GCAST, there's screencasts, and my last name starts with the letter G. That's why I named it Gcast. So in here, that directs direct to my YouTube channel. And I have some playlists in here, and one of them is all about Playwright. So if you go watch this video right here, this 12-minute video, that's essentially the first demo I showed you, just getting started with Playwright. If you go to this one, this 8.5-minute video, that's essentially that's what I'm going to show you. Oh, you know what? Actually, I'm not done yet. I wanted to show you running in Azure. Oh, gosh, I'm getting ahead of myself. So this is the demo I'm going to show you right now. And then the third one is incorporating into a CI/CD pipeline. All right. So if I wanted to run this in a Playwright workspace, then I need to log into Azure. And the way if you don't have an Azure account, then you can get a 30-day trial for free. And also, if you work for a company that offers MSDN subscriptions, that comes with free Azure hours as well. So if you don't have an Azure account, talk to your boss about getting one, because if they have MSDN, you may be able to get it for free. All right. And I mentioned this, there's a big create a resource button up here at the top. That's how we create just about anything in the Azure UI. I can come in here and search for Playwright Workspace here. And there it is right here, Playwright Workspace. So I say create Playwright Workspace. This dialog pops up, and I put a resource group in here. I can select an existing resource group, or I can create a brand new resource group right here. I give it a name. I could call it something like Playwright Pit PSWS for Playwright, or PWWS for Playwright Workspace, something like that. Select the region, which is Playwright Workspaces are not available in every Azure region. These are the ones that are available in. And then if I wanted to have reporting stored in the cloud, I can enable it here and tell it where to store that. Select a storage account or create a brand new storage account right here. So I won't do that right now because I've already got a Playwright workspace that I've created. I don't want to clutter up my account with all these other things here. So right here, I think is where it is. Come on. Playwright. This is the Playwright workspace I've created right here. And what's nice about this is that not only is there things like you can see some of the logs in here, you can specify, who has control and what kind of control they have. Tags are something that every Azure resource supports. It's just basically name value pairs. They don't really do anything, but they allow you to sort and filter in your reporting. So if you had some resources that all belong to the finance department, you might want to say department equals finance, and then you'd be able to find all those resources and how much processes they were running, how much they're costing the company, things like that. But what's really interesting here is this get started, because that tells you exactly what to do. And when I got started, I said npm init playwright at latest. But if I want to run it in the cloud, I want to say at Azure Playwright at latest. So let me do that. I'm going to go over here to the copy button. That's step one. Let's go ahead and do this. Go into here and stop that web server. And I'll just say npm init at Azure Playwright at latest. And it's installing some more packages that are required. For this. So if I go into, for this, the important one here is this right here, and there's some configuration in here. Let's see. Default Azure credentials are in here. What else changed? I'm not sure if this changed at all. Yeah, there's more dependencies in here. You can see there's some Azure stuff that was added in here to support that. So those are the big changes right here. And then I can run these things in my Azure Playwright workspace. First thing I have to do is to log into Azure. So let me do that. AZ login. And this actually on my other monitor is asking me which account do I want to use. So I selected my Microsoft.com account. And for some reason, I have just dozens of Azure subscriptions that I have access to, many of which don't even exist anymore. So it's going to ask me which one of the subscriptions do I care about. These are mostly other companies that I've worked with, and they at one time gave me access to their Azure account, and they no longer do. So that's why it's saying it failed. But the default one is number 44 right here. That's my Microsoft one, and I could just press enter here. I could type 44, or just press enter to accept it. Now I've logged in to the Azure account. You probably won't have to go through that step, because you probably only have one Azure account. All right. All right, let's go back to that blade here with the get started blade right here. Step 2, set up authentication. And I've already logged into Azure. That's good. Okay. I did that. Add the browser endpoint. So let's create an environment variable here. Copy that. And I can do it right in the command line when I say export playwright service URL equals, and this is the URL of that. Export, I'm running it in PowerShell. Export is a bash command. I can't remember the equivalent PowerShell command, so I'll just open up a bash window and do it there instead. Or you know what, actually, here, it'll tell me. Let's do that instead. So this thing toggles between bash and PowerShell. That's the one I'll do. $env : playwright service URL equals that. So go back to my PowerShell and do that instead. Okay, now I've got environment variables. Environment variables are just name value pairs. The name is playwright service URL, and this WSS : West USA blah 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 /browsers is that right there. And let's go back to here. Next step, enable advanced diagnostic. I'm going to skip all that stuff here because it's not required. Let's run these tests right here. And here's the command to do it. npx playwright test. We already did that before. I want to point to that configuration file because I want it to know that it's running in Azure. And then this part right here, -- workers equals 20 says, if we have a lot of tests to run, then spin up to 20 workers right here. Now you pay for those workers, so you want to be cognizant of how much money you're spending. In this case, there's no way it's going to spin up 20 workers. I've only got 3 tests and 3 browsers, so a total of 9 tests to run, but I'll do that anyway. and I'll run it. And then it's should be running in Azure. Nine tests. We'll see if the same things fail in Azure that failed locally. The fact that it's taking a while, there's a timeout in here. So that tells me that probably something is failing, because these tests should run pretty quickly, but if they don't run quickly, there is a retry option in here, and that's configurable. It'll retry for, I think, 30 seconds at a time. So one did fail, and there's the report that came up automatically. This is the one that failed. It failed in Safari, and you can kind of dig into it and see. It failed on the same one, trying to check that radio button. So something to look into and find out if you want to explore why did that one fail. But it was in fact running in the workspace. In fact, let me go over to that workspace, which is over here. And there is, under test runs, let's look at this. Right now, I'm in Chicago. I'm in the US Central Time Zone. So this one, if I refresh this, then you see at 4:56 p.m., that's where it is now. I'm an hour early from Pittsburgh. And you can see that that one just ran right here. It hasn't uploaded all the information here. The maximum concern session, probably only one session with just that few files. It says 0 workers, probably one worker. Everything's asynchronous in Azure, so that would probably update in a little bit. And so there it is. It's running in the Azure Playwright workspace. Pretty cool. And that makes it more. I'll show you one more thing. You probably, to make it more configurable or more persistent, you probably don't want this thing. Let me kill that web server again. You probably don't want this environment variable here in the browser. You probably want to put that somewhere in, like, either a key vault or a config file or something. You definitely don't want that in your source control. Hard coding your source control, because you might want to have the flexibility of running it in a different workspace. But you can do that here, and the commands for doing that are let's see, if I do play, no, I'm sorry, I think it's here, npm -- save -dev .env. Let's spell that wrong. Something wrong here. npm save -dev npm I, that's what I want. I for install. And here, and then what I can do is in my config file, this config file, Playwright service, then I can add the line, let's see. I want to copy that out. It's pretty long, so I want to do this. I want to create a .env file. That's what I want to do. So create a new file called .env, and in there I'll put my Playwright service URL. That's the same thing I did in the command window, except it doesn't have the word export or the word env colon in front of it. It's set right here. And then I have to, in my config file, I have to tell it where to find this environment variable, which is, yeah, think it's right here. Here, require.env. Let's see if that works. .env file. So this would be okay, I think that's right. And so now let me see if I get that. If I got everything right, then everything should just work exactly the same. In fact, what I'll do is just to save time, I'm going to comment out. I'm going to go into my config file and say, let's just run the stuff that's in Chromium, just one browser. Control K, Control C. So now I'm only going to do it one browser. So things will go a lot faster. Only running the Chromium browser. And now if I run these tests, npx playwright test dash config playwright service, I can get to this test workers equals 20. It should only run 3 tests, not 6, or not 9 rather. And it's running, it's getting the secrets out of there. They all passed. And if I say show report, which is in my history, where is it? There it is. Show report. Then I should get a browser with just these 3 tests in it in 2 different files here, and they've all passed. So that's a way of persisting it. Yeah, you can put environment variables in the command window, but then when I close that IDE and reopen it, I'll have to reset those environment variables. All right. So that is running tests in the workspace. Quick pause here. Any questions? Where are we here? Fine, there's StreamYard right there. All right. All right, I still don't see any questions. Okay, so I'm going to proceed. And how are we doing for time?
Yeah, we should be good for another 10 minutes.
Oh, okay. All right, I'll just show you the results of this. So I showed you how to do the steps involved in the CI/CD pipeline. They were in this slide deck here. And I know that's kind of a lot to look at here. This is just a quick summary. Have a GitHub repository and a local GitHub, register your application, and then go through these steps here. But more detail is available in the video that I showed you right here. This third video right here, it's 17 minutes long, and it goes through the fact that you need to, what you can do to create a GitHub action and incorporate that into your CI/CD pipeline. So I have one that I've created already. And what I'll do is where's my GitHub repo? I must have closed it. So let me reopen that. I've got too many tabs open. GitHub.com. I have a repository that I called Playwright. Is it the Playwright demo? This is the one right here. Playwright demo. It's right here. And in here, I've got, first of all, under settings, I have some secrets that I've set up. So down here under secrets and variables, GitHub actions, I've got these secrets right here. And I need to populate that. And it tells you in the video, it shows you where to do that. But basically, when I register an application in Azure, if I go to Azure.com, there is the option to register an application, which I've already done. App registrations. And in that app registration, there's this right here. And I have to give this thing permission to access that GitHub repository and run actions within that GitHub repository. But in here, I also have the client ID and I have the tenant ID. And those are the secrets that I'm placing into here. The tenant ID and the client ID, the subscription. It's a shame that that's not listed here as well. But if I go into the Azure portal and look at subscriptions, the subscription where I'm running my Playwright workspace, it's right here. And the subscription ID is here. I can grab that. And then finally, the other secret is the Playwright service URL. And that is in the, close all these things here out. let's see, the Playwright service URL was in that Playwright demo. Where is it? Oh, here. The Playwright service URL, which we saw here in Get Started right here. This Playwright service URL. This right here. So I put those all into my secrets. So that's one of the steps that's involved in there. Another step is to register the application. And the other is to create GitHub actions. And then what will happen is and the important one here, if you've worked with continuous integration, continuous deployment before, you'll understand about YAML files. Oh, I have another project that I'm using here. This one right here. Okay, so this one I've configured. It's also, I think, only using the Chromium browser, so only going to run tests there. It has same tests here. There's my example tests. Here's my test there. And is this the one? Let me make sure I've got the right one here. Might be on the wrong one. Hang on a second. This is the one there. Yeah, this right here. Yeah, so here, in here, I have a YAML file, which is under GitHub Playwright YAML. And it was created by default when I ran that npm init Azure / Playwright at latest, that one. It was created by default, a YAML file, and I tweaked it a little bit here. But I'll walk you through this YAML file. Let me zoom in, control, let me see, view. Appearance, zoom in. There's control equals, that's what I should know. I should memorize that. There we go. Control equals, all right. And then make it a little bit easier to see by moving these windows around like that. Okay, so just the name of it, Playwright tests. And this says that this is the trigger. It says, I want to run this CID when something happens, when I push to the main branch. There is no master branch, just push to the main branch, or when I do a pull request. Either one of those, when either one of those things happens, then I want to run these jobs right here. I really only have one job. It's called test. And that test is a timeout of 60 minutes. So if it doesn't finish in 60 minutes, just give up. And the steps are: 1, check out the code from the repository, set up all the Node environments with the long-term support version of Node, install any dependencies. There's a file. Node uses a file to say what are the dependencies. Install the Playwright browsers. I commented it all out except for one, so it's just going to install one Playwright browser, and then run the Playwright test. Essentially, that's going to say npm Playwright test, run all the tests, and it actually is right here. npx Playwright test, and if canceled, Playwright report. And then here's where to store the reports, save the reports for 30 days. So that's what this thing's going to do, and it'll do it whenever I do a push to the main branch. So let's do that. Let's make a small change here. I'll change this retention days from 30 to 10 right here. And then I'll push that change into the repository. And I can do that through the command line, or I can do it from Visual Studio Code by going on source. Oh, I'm in the wrong URL. I think. Hold on a second. I think I might be np Playwright Pit. Is this the one I just now created? This might be the one I just created. No, this is right. I think this is the one that I want. I'm in the wrong one. I'm sorry. This is the one that's connected to my repo. So I'll make a small change to this and say, but everything else is the same here. Not exactly the same, actually. So I say on branch main, I've got some permissions in here to read and write. So I tweaked this a little bit. Tell it to run on Ubuntu. Here's where to find the secrets when it runs that, the client ID, the tenant ID, etc. Some dependencies to install. Where is the URL of the Playwright workspace right here? Where to store the report, and so on. So what I want to do is I'm going to make because I said trigger it on a push to the main branch. that's what I'm going to do. And I'll make a small change here, go from retention days 5 to, I can change anything in here and push it to the GitHub repo. So this is pointed to, let's see, let me bring up my GitHub repo. This is pointed to this GitHub repo. It's the same code right here. So for example, this here, I'm sorry, this YAML file right here, right now it says 10. I'm going to change it to 5. And that'll be the change that I make. And when I do that, it's going to trigger this whole action right here. So let's do that. I'm going to commit. I'll say retention days as the commit. Commit that locally, stage and commit it locally. And then sync changes. Sync changes will do a push to this GitHub repo. And now that I've done that, that should trigger that whole thing to go out here. So it should trigger this action right here. So let me just refresh this page here on the action tabs. And there it is. So it triggered it. It's running this retention days. It's running it. Let me click on that to see what's happening. It's running this test right here. 16 seconds into it. I think it took like a minute and a half last time I ran this to do everything. As I say, UI tests, they can be slow. And as I'm doing that also, it should be running a test in the Playwright workspace, which is, where is that? Playwright, is it here? I think Playwright workspace, no, it's not here. Go back into Azure, into the Playwright workspace, this one right here. And if I go to down under test runs, right now it's 5:12 p.m. It's not showing up yet. But let's see this thing as it goes on. It's been about a minute so far. Once it finishes, it'll either pass or fail. It should run those 3 tests, or 3 tests in one browser, so a total of 3. Give it another 30 seconds or so. All right, so it's done. It passed. I can drill down into it here and get a little bit more information about everything that happened in this action. I told it the YAML file said set up the job, run the checkout, log into Azure, install the dependencies, run the tests down here. There's the tests passing right here, upload a report, etc. And post login, post run, complete job, and so on. And if I go back over to the Playwright workspace, because I told it to run in the Playwright workspace, and refresh this, I should see that. And there it is right there. It ran, and just a little bit of information in here. And I think if I run it, let me see, come back to here. This is where here. Yeah, this is the one I just ran, and run that report. Yeah, show report. I should be able to see those things running right here. So reports on that. If something had failed, I'd have details about why it failed. All right. I think I'm just about done with everything. Let me go back to my slides. And the last thing I said was caution. They can be slow. So think about when you want to run them. Don't wait too long. You want to be as agile as possible. If there's a failure, you want to fail fast so you know when. But you also at the same time don't want to slow down your developers too much. Did a demo, and these are the links here. So the official Playwright documentation, click on that. Playwright workspace documentation is here. That's the Azure workspaces. And then the videos that I showed you, those are all right here. I don't show the URL here because what you can do, well, this is me right here. So you can find me online just about anywhere. And please smash the subscribe button to my 2 TV shows, especially this GCast one, which has information about that. And these slides right here, that tiny URL will get you to these slides, or you can take a picture of that QR code. That will just take you there as well. And both of them, let me click on that just to prove it, that they will take you to, I said, click on that. There we go. Right here. And that takes you to the slide decks that I showed you here. So now you'll have all those, all the links that are in that slide deck and any of the notes that I had and so on, including the videos that I showed. My name is David. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for inviting me into your home.
Thank you, Dave. It has been a pleasure always hosting you here with this Playwright being a new topic. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. I'll see you again next week with another topic. Thank you.